Hey friends, hit that subscribe, like, and comment to join this amazing journey. Every click powers new content and means the world to me. Thanks for being the heart of this awesome community. Moonlit dancing under her spell. Folk dancers bound by a rural witch's ancestral pact. They spoke of her in whispers around the hearth fires, in the dusty corners of the village tavern, and in the half-lit barns where straw and secrets gathered. The old stories wove her image, a woman tall and gaunt, with eyes that reflected the moon's silver glow. She was not the type of witch to stand on a street corner cackling. No, her power was more insidious, threaded through ancient folk customs and the rhythms of fiddles, stamped heels, and swirling skirts. Whenever talk turned to dancing and curses, people in the valley inevitably mentioned her name. Adalind, the last in a bloodline rumored to have brokered a pact centuries ago. They called it the Ancestral Pact of the Moonlit spell, though seldom allowed. And they claimed that whenever the fiddles struck up a certain tune by moonlight, the dancers were bound to keep moving, swaying, spinning, stepping until dawn's first light, as though a dark magic pulled at their limbs. Younger villagers scoffed at these tales as superstition. Yet, year after year, in the season of the harvest celebrations, strangers appeared at the edges of the farmland with wide eyes, telling improbable stories of men and women dancing deep into the night, seemingly unable to stop, eyes vacant as they whirled beneath the pale luminescence. And at the heart of it all, so the rumor went, stood Adalind, or one of her spiritual heirs, an unbroken line of witches who commanded the dancing throng with a mere glance or a whispered incantation. Though the village was far from major trade routes, travelers sometimes found themselves wandering in by accident or seeking local crafts rumored to be made with uncanny skill. One such traveler was Marisol, a folklorist from a distant university. She had come under pretext of studying rural dance traditions, the ones passed through generations by old fiddlers and grandparents. In truth, though, she had heard half a rumor about this valley, a rumor that a moonlit dance once enthralled the entire population in some archaic ritual. She was neither gullible nor averse to the possibility of real mysticism. Her plan was to interview elders, gather old tunes, and glean how much was myth and how much might be factual. She arrived in autumn, a time of crisp air, red gold leaves, and the tang of wood smoke swirling through the lanes. Perfect conditions, or so she thought, for unearthing the local lore. Right away, she sensed an undercurrent in the village. People were friendly on the surface, offering bread, cheese, or cider, but if she ventured to ask about old dancing customs, their eyes darted away. Some claimed ignorance, others quickly changed the subject to the year's harvest or the weather. The children, unguarded, would mention dancing nights that older siblings or parents forbade them from attending. But as soon as an adult overheard, the conversation was hushed. Marisol felt the tension, a swirl of excitement and fear coexisting in the villagers' voices. Some intangible weight pressed upon them. Eventually, she found an ally in a stooped old man named Georg. He was the caretaker of the village hall, a rickety timber structure near the center of the settlement. Rumor said he was distantly related to the local fiddler families. Perhaps that gave him perspective on the music at the heart of the legend. For several days, Marisol shared tea with Georg in the empty hall, listening as he recounted what he'd gleaned from his father and grandfather. They say in older times, Georg whispered, the dance was called the Knight's Embrace. People believed it welcomed good fortune, brought in a bountiful harvest. But eventually, something turned dark. There was talk of a woman, Agatha, maybe Adalind's ancestor, who made a vow to ensure her crops thrived even if drought or plague struck the region. She offered, well, something, to a spirit or demon. The result was that each harvest, under a full or near full moon, the villagers performed this unstoppable dance. They might gather in a clearing or near the orchard. Once the fiddles played a certain tune, their feet would move on their own. They'd swirl and skip, arms weaving patterns in the air until sunrise. If they tried to resist, they'd feel pain, or so the old folks said. That's the gist, a harvest ritual steeped in witchcraft. Real or not, it's part of our local myths. Marisol pressed for more specifics. Who was the witch, and how did the tradition last so long? Georg shrugged. Different storytellers name different witches. Some say the original was Anna Lilienthal, others say Adalind Hofstetter. But the line merges. Over the generations, it's said that the female descendants keep the knowledge. One might marry away or die childless, but somehow the line continues. The tradition of the forced dance fades in and out. People claim it's been a century or more since an entire village was enthralled. But smaller groups, especially the dedicated folk dancers who practice the old choreographies, might gather in secret once or twice a year. Some whisper that if you hear the music on such a night, you can't help but follow it. But me, I've never personally witnessed it. Maybe it's all nonsense. Or maybe I just never wanted to see it. She gleaned from Georg that the next full moon was only a week away. Traditionally, Georg muttered, the harvest festival might coincide with that. I can't say more, but if you want to see something that might be from the old ways. You might do well to keep your eyes open after midnight, somewhere near the orchard glen. Then he refused to elaborate, as though spooked by his own words. Intrigued, Marisol spent days exploring the orchard glen. She found an open meadow encircled by old apple trees, many twisted with age. Stones jutted here and there, carved with faint runes or shapes. Possibly old boundary markers or the remnants of archaic folk altars. She scoured local records in a small library that doubled as the mayor's office. She found mentions from the early 1800s of unholy midnight revels at that orchard, references to complaints of the devil's fiddles. But no official clampdown ever manifested. The region's authorities apparently turned a blind eye or couldn't prove wrongdoing. Over time, references tapered off. But that intangible sense of a hush over the orchard endured. The day of the full moon arrived. The village bustled, ironically, with a cheerful harvest fair. Stalls sold homemade jams, dried sausages, and crocheted shawls. Children jumped in leaf piles. The older folks displayed crafts. All seemed normal. Marisol roamed the fair with her notebook, absorbing local color, occasionally striking up conversation about older dance forms. People answered politely, but guardedly. Late in the afternoon, a small group of younger women performed a lively folk dance near the well, wearing embroidered aprons and ribbons. Their steps were precise, and the music soared from a couple of fiddlers. Yet Marisol couldn't shake the feeling that she glimpsed tension in their eyes. They glanced at each other as though mindful of an invisible boundary. Even their footwork, though skillful, seemed subdued compared to the rumors of unstoppable, moonlit dancing. That evening, clouds drifted across the sky, threatening to hide the moon. But eventually, the silver orb peeked through, bright enough to cast shadows. Marisol found an excuse to slip away from her lodging. She headed to the orchard, stepping quietly along a dirt path. The wind rustled the trees. An occasional owl hooted. She half suspected she'd find no one, that it was all hype. She was prepared to be disappointed. Then, near the orchard's edge, she heard fiddles, soft but insistent, weaving a slow, haunting melody. Her pulse quickened. Carefully, she edged forward, concealing herself behind a thick trunk. In the glade, the moonlight exposed a ring of about a dozen people, mostly young adults, but with a few older ones, standing in a circle. Each wore simple, old-fashioned garments. The fiddler, an elderly man, bowed across the strings in a mesmerizing pattern. Next to him stood a tall female figure. Marisol guessed she might be in her 40s, with a faintly stern face and dark hair pulled back tight. Something about her posture commanded authority. Her eyes flickered in the moon's glow. The watchers, 8 men and women, waited tensely as if for a signal. Then the fiddler's tune shifted, picking up a hypnotic pulse. The tall woman lifted her arms in a graceful arc, and the watchers stepped into motion, forming pairs or groups, their feet tapping in unison. Marisol had observed folk dances across many cultures, but this felt different. The dancers' expressions grew rapt, almost dreamlike, their limbs moving in fluid patterns that seemed both choreographed and slightly chaotic. She noticed a subtle trembling in a few of them, as if they resisted or were uncertain. But the music's pull overcame any hesitation. The tall woman, presumably the leader, began to mouth words. Marisol couldn't catch them, but they carried a certain hush of command. The dancers' steps accelerated. Soon they were whirling, skirts and trousers swirling in arcs. The fiddler's bow flew across the strings, the melody strangely dissonant yet enthralling. Time stretched. The dancers kept going, unstoppable, as if possessed by the beat. Some of them seemed to sweat despite the chill. Marisol felt an odd compulsion herself. Her foot tapped unconsciously. Part of her wanted to stride forward and ask who these people were, whether this was some private practice session. But fear held her back. She recalled the rumors of an ancestral pact. The pace quickened further, the dancers breathing heavily now. She glimpsed one young woman whose eyes seemed almost glazed, tears at the corners. Another dancer, a man with a pale face, bit his lip in concentration. And the tall woman, presumably the modern Adalind or an heir to that line, watched them steadily, occasionally whispering or chanting. Abruptly, Marisol heard a rustle behind her. She turned to see Georg, the old caretaker, crouched in the shadows. He caught her eye with a gesture of warning. Silently, he pointed away from the orchard as if urging her to leave. She wavered, curiosity urging her to stay. But Georg's alarm was palpable. She nodded, following him on tiptoes back through the orchard's perimeter. The music's hold lingered in her mind, that swirling, urgent fiddle that threatened to wrap around her very bones. Once they were a safe distance away, Georg whispered, "Foolish to watch them. If they'd seen you, who knows if they'd have let you go." Some nights, intruders are forced to join the dance, and it can be dangerous. They retreated to Georg's small hut near the church. He offered her a stiff drink. She asked how long the dancers would continue. "Until the moon sets, or until dawn, whichever comes first," he said, voice trembling. "They're bound by that music, by the incantations. I suspect that tall woman was Adalind Hofstadter's descendant, or so the gossip goes. She's the caretaker of the old ways, for better or worse. I've heard that each dancer is chosen, or sometimes coerced. Once they join, it's not easy to break free. Once the tune starts, they can't stop dancing if the witch doesn't allow it." Marisol tried to reconcile this with her modern mind. But they all do it willingly? Or are they controlled? Georg shrugged. A mix, perhaps. Some might be devout believers in the old pact, thinking it secures the harvest. Others might fear the consequences if they refuse. And then there's talk that if you refuse, your crops fail or your livestock sicken. No one wants that. Not in a place so reliant on agriculture. He sighed. For many, it's a well-guarded secret, not even shared with their children until they come of age. But once a generation, an outsider stumbles on it. Usually, that outsider is warned to keep silent or, well, they vanish from the region. This is a quiet place. The world seldom pays attention. Her mind spun with possibilities. She recalled the missing scout leader's puzzle. No footsteps in the snow. Could a similar enchantment have forcibly whisked him away, compelling him to dance somewhere until... What? She took a breath, then asked Georg if he knew anything about that incident. He shook his head. I only know it from local talk. The official search turned up nothing. Some of the older dancers whispered that the man might have glimpsed an off-season ritual, or maybe he intruded on Adalind's private domain. If so, they might have forced him to join. Or maybe the old magic grew strong enough that it erased his tracks. Hard to say. I make no claims, only repeating rumors. Despite the starkness of these claims, Marisol felt that intangible sense that some thread connected everything. She returned to her lodging, but sleep proved elusive. She kept picturing that orchard scene, the dancers' expressions locked in a mixture of rapture and strain. Could they truly be compelled all night? She recalled the hush of the night wind carrying the faint strains of the fiddle well after midnight. And in her imagination, she saw the lost scout leader pressed among them, unseen, dancing with no footprints left behind. Over the following days, she observed the villagers more carefully. She noticed that some walked stiffly, as though sore from an intense workout. A few had bruises on their ankles. She recognized them from the orchard glade that night. They offered no explanations, and she dared not mention having spied on them. Meanwhile, rumors of a prospective wedding or harvest blessing drifted through the village. She gleaned that whenever an important community event neared, the so-called caretaker of the old magic, presumably the tall woman, would orchestrate an official festival, while behind the scenes, a more secret night of dancing might also occur. She also heard mention of a moonlit dance that sometimes involved masked figures in bird-like costumes. At first, that detail seemed random, but it echoed the curious global pattern she'd read about: bird mask sightings. Could it be that in some expansions of the ritual, participants wore avian masks to symbolize a transformation or a link to ancient fertility gods? She asked discreet questions, but villagers clammed up. She rummaged in the musty corners of the library, unearthing a single reference from 1875 to a Night of Feathers, in which certain participants donned bird-like masks to perform an air dance. The text was cryptic, referencing the name Adalind as well. Then she recalled that bizarre rumor about bird mask perpetrators across the globe rummaging in the shadows. Might this local phenomenon tie in? Could the same forces behind unstoppable dancing also produce illusions of bird-like criminals? Or was that a separate track entirely? One evening, Georg confided a final piece of lore. Long ago, they say, the pact wasn't just about dancing. The dancing was the visible part, but behind it lay an oath that if the orchard thrived, a certain lineage would remain custodians of an ancient power. Some magical agreement with a spirit or demon that demanded tribute in the form of dance and maybe, occasionally, a life. Rumor says in the darkest times, a life had to be surrendered or bound to the dance forever. That's the real terror. But it's been centuries since anyone heard such a thing. Georg looked uneasy. Of course, that might be just sensational myth. Yet the mention of a life surrendered brought Marisol's thoughts back to the missing scout leader. She forced the question, could they have forced him to be that life? Georg only shook his head sorrowfully, uncertain. An opportunity arose on another full moon a fortnight later. Word circulated that a harvest blessing was to occur publicly in the church courtyard with standard prayers and a small candle-lit vigil. Meanwhile, rumors indicated that the orchard might host another secret ceremony. Marisol steeled herself to investigate, determined to see whether any bird mask elements manifested. This time, she brought a discreet camera and a warm cloak. Georg warned her that she was risking more than curiosity. but she insisted. She needed to know if this had any link to broader bird mask sightings or the missing man. Georg, possibly out of guilt or protective instinct, offered to accompany her. That night, they left the village under the pretext of traveling to a neighboring farm. Instead, they slipped into the orchard by a roundabout route. The moon was nearly full, the shadows crisp. Hiding behind thick shrubs, they waited. The orchard was silent, and for a moment, Marisol feared nothing would happen. Then, one by one, silhouettes emerged from different paths, converging at the clearing. She counted around 15 people, some she recognized from the village. The fiddler again was present, same as before, and the tall woman who likely served as the witch or caretaker. But this time, among them stood a handful of figures wearing elaborate masks shaped like bird heads. One had a raven's beak, glossy black. Another wore something reminiscent of a hawk with a curved, fierce point. The others wore simpler face coverings, though all had some feather detail. The fiddler struck a note, and the watchers arranged themselves in a circle. The music began, a slow, haunting introduction. The masked participants moved with a stylized grace, swirling cloaks that resembled wings. The others soon joined in. It was simultaneously beautiful and unsettling, feathers glinting in moonlight, the sense of an archaic drama unfolding. The tall woman chanted softly, words lost in the wind. Then the tempo rose, and again that unstoppable dance took hold. This time, the presence of masks lent it an otherworldly vibe, as if these were not villagers, but spirits or creatures of old myth. Marisol, heart-pounding, snapped a few silent photos with her camera. She could sense the primal energy in the scene. Some dancers occasionally moaned or gasped, as though the exertion was forced upon them. The masked one seemed unaffected, moving elegantly, commanding the others with mere gestures. Georg, beside her, trembled. This is bigger than a mere harvest tradition. They're evoking something deeper. I've never seen the masks used in my lifetime. Possibly an older ritual. Then, abruptly, the fiddler's tune shifted to a savage, driving beat. The dancers spun faster. A sense of tension grew. The tall woman raised her arms, nodding at one masked figure wearing a raven beak. That figure glided to the center, beckoning others to close ranks. A single dancer, a younger man, stumbled forward as though singled out. He tried to back away, but the circle closed. The masked figure pressed its beak close to his face, as if whispering something. The young man quivered, then sank to his knees. For a moment, Marisol feared actual violence might happen. But the circle parted. The fiddler's music softened. The man stood, expression blank, and resumed dancing, but more frantic. The group danced around him in a tight ring. The masked raven figure traced a pattern in the air. It was mesmerizing, hard to interpret. Then, with a final crescendo, the tune cut off. The orchard fell silent. Panting, the dancers drooped like puppets whose strings were temporarily slack. The masked ones remained upright. Marisol braced herself to see what might happen next. Suddenly, the raven-masked figure turned sharply, as if sensing an intrusion. Its head tilted, scanning the tree line. Panicked, Marisol and Georg ducked lower. She feared they'd been spotted. Indeed, the figure stepped away from the circle, gliding toward their vantage. The other masked dancers parted, allowing it to pass. The orchard hush thickened. A wave of adrenaline shot through Marisol's veins. She signaled Georg to retreat, but he was frozen in place. The figure drew nearer, each step unnervingly silent, black beak shimmering. At the last possible second, Georg mustered the will to grab Marisol's sleeve and yank her back into deeper brush. They scuttled away, trying not to rustle the branches. The orchard's next row of trees gave some cover. The masked figure, presumably uncertain, did not chase them full tilt. Instead, it halted, scanning the darkness. Marisol and Georg took that chance to slip out of the orchard entirely, hearts pounding, stumbling over roots. Once they reached a safe distance, they ran. That near encounter ended any illusions for Marisol that this was a benign tradition. She had seen power dynamics at play, some dancers enthralled, some masked individuals controlling the flow. Could these masked ones be the bird masked criminals rumored worldwide, or was it purely an internal village phenomenon? In the immediate days that followed, she struggled with moral quandaries. Should she report this to authorities? The local police likely wouldn't believe a word about unstoppable dancing or witches. And she possessed no definitive proof of wrongdoing besides some odd photos of costumed figures dancing in the moonlight. The pictures, ironically, look almost like a reenactment or festival. Nothing that shouted crime. Yet she worried for the well-being of those forced to dance, like that young man singled out. Georg, for his part, grew more distressed. He warned Marisol that the orchard watchers might suspect her presence, which could put her at risk. Indeed, more than once, she caught glimpses of suspicious villagers eyeing her with hostility. She decided to cut her visit short, having gleaned enough to piece together the puzzle for her research. Before leaving, she pressed Georg about the scout leader's case one last time. Could he have become that singled-out dancer? Or did they end him in some violent offering? Georg simply shook his head. I have no certain knowledge. But if he stumbled on a secret gathering out of season, it's possible they took measures to ensure secrecy. Some talk about a hidden cabin deep in the forest, used to confine outsiders who witnessed too much. Whether that's rumor or truth, I do not know. Marisol departed, heavy with unanswered questions. Back at the university, she compiled her notes into a lengthy paper on moonlit folk dances and apparent ritual enchantment in a rural region. She deliberately omitted references to the orchard's location, fearing retribution for the villagers. She included only cryptic details about the mask-wearing subset. Her academic peers found the account both fascinating and overly dramatic, some suspecting she was weaving folklore as reality. Yet even the skeptics admitted the existence of an uncommonly cohesive tradition. And if it was real, how had it remained hidden from mainstream knowledge for so long? That might have been the end of the story, if not for the global puzzle of bird mask sightings that eventually found its way to her desk. Researchers from different corners of the world stumbled on her paper, noticing parallels. They noted that the orchard participants wore masks reminiscent of the raven or hawk beaks described in scattered burglary or infiltration stories. Some speculated the orchard tradition was the root of the entire global phenomenon, or else it was one branch of a bigger secret society operating under the guise of local folk rituals. Meanwhile, a few of the orchard's masked individuals might have parted ways and traveled internationally, enacting break-ins under the same avian aesthetic. One group of enthusiasts concocted wild theories that the orchard witches served as spiritual mentors, empowering members to perform supernatural feats, such as vanishing footprints or forcing unsuspecting people into enthralling dances. Far-fetched, yes, but it matched certain unsolved threads, including how some burglary scenes featured no footprints, or how watchers reported criminals leaping impossible fences as if aided by a hidden force. Even talk of the missing scout leader's footprints stopping abruptly paralleled the orchard's rumored ability to hamper or conceal tracks. The simplest explanation was that cunning criminals used illusions and well-practiced stealth. But to many, it reeked of something more. As for the orchard's role, villagers presumably continue these moonlit gatherings. Marisol's incursion likely spurred them to be more cautious. She never returned to that valley. Georg, in an occasional letter, wrote that tensions ran high after her departure. The orchard rites still happened, but more discreetly. He implied that, for a time, the masked leadership was furious at having nearly exposed themselves. A rumor that they'd cast repellent spells to keep outsiders away rose among the locals. One or two rebellious young villagers disappeared from the district entirely, whether from genuine flight or from being forced out. Georg didn't know. Over time, Georg himself wrote less and less. Then no letters came at all, raising the possibility that he'd passed away or been silenced. Without an insider, the Orchard Glade stands as a continuing locus of rumor. Some travelers passing near the region speak of faint fiddles at night, or glimpses of black feathered costumes weaving among the trees. A few mention hearing shouts or moans echoing across the moonlit fields. They can't confirm the identity of those dancers. Officially, no local authority acknowledges any wrongdoing. And so, the orchard's legacy remains buried behind communal hush. Meanwhile, if the orchard tradition does indeed link to that broader bird mask pattern, it suggests an older, deeper root to these phenomena than previously suspected. Possibly, this ancestral pact forged in a remote farmland centuries ago spread its influence through diaspora or clandestine gatherings, eventually spawning variants worldwide. Or maybe it's just a microcosm of a more universal archetype, the bird-like mask as a symbol of occult power. Returning to the tragic mention of the scout leader, his case remains unsolved to this day. No body, no evidence, no confession. Family members sometimes wonder if he's alive, forced into an endless dance, or subjected to some mind-warping enchantment. That may sound absurd, like a fairy tale horror story. But in a region where the improbable merges with the everyday, who can say for sure? Some suggest he might have escaped after months in captivity, amnesiac, or fearful of returning. Others suspect that if the orchard's ritual demanded a sacrifice, his fate was sealed. The village never openly acknowledges any connection. The official stance is that he presumably died of exposure or fell into an unseen crevice, with nature reclaiming his remains. A small memorial stands near the lakeshore, an epitaph reading, "He loved these wilds, may he rest in them." Yet for those who suspect darker truths, that epitaph rings hollow. In the grander scheme, the orchard stands as one puzzle piece in a mosaic of dark folk traditions that endure in hidden pockets across the globe. One or two anthropologists quietly investigate parallels: Haitian Vodou dance possessions, Southeastern European wolf nights, certain Andalusian spring festivals rumored to tie participants in unstoppable rhythmic trances. The orchard phenomenon is unique for its explicit link to an alleged witch's lineage and the bird mask cameo in some gatherings. But patterns of unstoppable ritual dancing exist in multiple folk cultures. The difference, in most places, it's purely cultural tradition, not bound by an alleged demonic or spirit pact. The orchard's participants, apparently, truly cannot stop once the music and incantations seize them. And so the story ends not with resolution, but with the hush of an autumn wind blowing through ancient apple trees, scattering leaves across a moonlit clearing. In that clearing, on certain nights, figures gather to dance under a compulsion older than any living memory, guided by the quiet authority of a witch's descendant. Some nights, masked individuals appear, recalling the global trend of avian-themed intruders who slip from the net of justice. Are they mere folklore or a real ephemeral force that defies detection? Are they criminals or keepers of an arcane vow? Whichever the truth, the orchard stands as a living testament to the notion that beneath the surface of everyday life, entire webs of old pacts, unbroken curses, and intangible forces may swirl. For the traveler, the orchard might look unremarkable in daylight, just knotted trunks and patchy grass. But if one dares linger past dusk on a certain moonlit eve, they might hear the faint rise of fiddles, see torchlight flickering between twisted branches, catch the swirl of dancers locked in a mesmerizing pattern. If they watch too long, they might find themselves stepping forward, drawn by the music's unstoppable momentum, losing track of time, and risking that once they join the circle, they can't break free. The orchard's moonlit dancing, under the spell of an ancestral, which is no playful folk festival. It is a harsh contract, a living gesh that binds souls to its unrelenting beat until dawn. And for any who might trespass with the intention of unveiling or interfering, the question remains, would they vanish with no footsteps left behind, adding yet another heartbreak to the region's folklore? That is the final hush that grips outsiders who sense the orchard's secret. They weigh curiosity against caution, suspecting that sometimes ignorance is safer. Because once you hear that midnight tune, once you see the circle of masked watchers, you might find yourself spinning in a dance that claims you deeper than you ever imagined. By daybreak, you too could be a footnote in the village's labyrinth of hush. Or you could be gone entirely, leaving behind nary a track in the snow, an echo of the same dark magic that has haunted the valley for generations, forever tying your fate to a centuries-old pact that demands dancers under moonlight, enthralled by her spell.